Hi, my name is Josh McEwen, and this is my new life story. So I grew up on a farm in northeast Missouri. I had a sister. She was about 10 years older than me. And my parents, great parents, and a great childhood. You know, I lived in a small community. I had 40 kids in my graduating class, and you know, just a great example of how to grow up. My dad was a super hard worker. You know, he was not the spiritual leader in the household, and so you know, that was, you know, unfortunate, just because I know he struggled with his faith, but he was a good man. My mom was kind of the spiritual leader of the house, and I was really lucky because she was the hands and feet of Jesus, if there was anybody who had hands and feet in my hometown. So she was a great example of what it looked like to serve the community. Yeah, so growing up through high school, I was very heavily involved in athletics. That's really where I found my sense of identity. And so, you know, played all three sports, went to college, played football and baseball. And it was really between my transition from college to grad school was whenever I started to re-engage my faith and started to have questions about, you know, what am I going to do with my life? And I could definitely feel, you know, God pulling on my heartstrings. And so there was very much an identity struggle there. And there was one night whenever I was reading a book about just how to, you know, make these decisions about your life with God as a forefront and focus. And I had a really bad dream, a very demonic dream that felt as real as it could possibly be. And I thought, like, wow, you know, this is, there's probably something to this if this is happening. So, you know, I was a 22-year-old guy, and, you know, I'm supposed to be some big tough football player, right? And I was screaming in my bed, screaming in my bed from this. And so I would say my re-engagement in my faith kind of started there. So went through grad school, had a wonderful church home there at Northwest Missouri State, and then we moved to Kansas City. 2015, we moved to Kansas City, and we did some house church stuff. We had my daughter Eliana in 2017. From a very young age, I had always kind of felt called to God. I can remember being 3 or 4 years old and, you know, asking questions to my mom about God, heaven, hell, all these things. And so I've always felt called, certainly. And then just growing up through high school, being a part of athletics, you know, a big part of you know, being in your adolescent and teenage years is, you know, you just want to fit in. And so that time whenever I was driving back from, you know, having a night of doing stupid things and just completely drenched in shame and guilt, and I had that just moment of forgiveness and repentance and love and all these different things, that was really the biggest turning point for me. And what I've realized now is that, you know, this isn't anything that I've done. I was always God's, you know, even in the midst of my sin, my shame, my guilt, all of this, you know, I was always God's and I was always His. And so it wasn't ever anything that I've done. I wouldn't say even now. You would look at my life now and you would see a guy who may resemble his past life. You know, I probably say and do things that look like maybe a non-Christian would do, but the point is it was God's grace. What Jesus means to me, and I've talked about this a little bit in my kind of conversion, but what Jesus means to me is hope and a home. And so whenever I think about you know, my conversion and the grace and forgiveness of Jesus, I always think about the story of the prodigal son. And you know, the prodigal son wasn't dusted up, and he wasn't perfect when he came home. He just came home. And so my conversion to faith was that, you know, whenever I would say my big repentance, you know, it certainly felt like a coming home to Christ. And I think that's my story every day, every week. You know, there's times whenever, I run back to God as a father, drenched in shame and guilt, and He accepts me for what I am. And so, I just want to make sure that my story is so much about the goodness of Christ.